Author query form. Journal title article number, SLG429713. Dear author/editor, greetings, and thank you for publishing with Sage Publications. Your article has been copy-edited, and we have a few queries for you. Please address these queries when you send your proof corrections to the production editor. Thank you for your time and effort. Please assist us by clarifying the following queries. No. 1. Query. Please check that all authors are listed in the proper order, clarify which part of each author's name is his or her surname, and verify that all author names are correctly spelled/punctuated and are presented in a manner consistent with any prior publications. Please provide a 2-3 sentence bio for the author. Note that keywords have been taken from the PDF. Please check and approve. Ben 1985 has been changed to Ben 1996 to match the reference list. Please approve. Rumler and Brach, 1996 has been changed to Rumler and Brach, 1990 to match the reference list. Please approve. Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform 2008 has been changed to Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform 2007 to match the reference list. Please approve. Please verify whether the conflicting interest and funding statements are accurate and correct. Anderson, 2010 is not cited in the text. Please indicate where a citation should appear or allow us to delete the reference. Also, please provide the complete details for the same. Please provide complete details for the reference Eggers and Goldsmith, 2003. GFOA, 2011 is not cited in the text. Please indicate where a citation should appear or allow us to delete the reference. Please provide the publisher location for the reference Justice, 2009. Please provide complete details for the reference Kaffer, 2009, 2010A, 2010B. Please provide the publisher location in reference MacDonald, 2011. Please provide an abstract not to exceed 250 words. Please check whether the contact information of the corresponding author is okay as set. Remarks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Right-sizing government, the literature and the Detroit experience. State and Local Government Review 000, 1-8. The author, S. 2011 reprints and permission, sagepub.com/journalspermissions.nav doi, 10.1177/0160323x11429713 http://slgr.sagepub.com. AQ14. Public service providers everywhere are hearing the calls for government transformation, and a new wave of Janet Anderson 1,2 AQ1 right-sizing initiatives has emerged under related concepts such as re-engineering, restructuring and OK reorganization. With the scholarly literature largely focused on cases where cutback management has been practiced in recent decades, governments have been left to grapple with unsustainable fiscal and operational systems without any overarching logic, or guideposts, for change. Nowhere is this more evident than in the abstract city of Detroit, where a swirl of initiatives in this decade has invoked different and potentially competing AQ14 concepts of right-sizing. 1. Centered on comprehensive planning of the scope of local government, looking at its functions and organization. A second, centered on streamlining business processes within existing keywords functions and organizations, and a third centered on consolidating the built environment so that public right-sizing government, cutback management, fiscal stress services can be more efficiently configured. Without adjusting the mix of service responsibilities within an AQ3 across jurisdictions overlapping an area, it is hard to imagine that sustainable reforms of service delivery OK systems will be realized. A broad-based definition of the sources of a jurisdiction's problems must be demonstrated through data-driven analysis, so that all stakeholders can be engaged around a common roadmap for action. Stagflation era of the 1970s. While important introduction cases of the practice of cutback management in an era of widespread government fiscal cry have been documented, the value of this literasis, there are calls from every sector for Transtour as guide to a more global challenge of formation. These calls invoke a sense that right-sizing has not developed. The literature current systems are not sustainable and need focuses on explaining what jurisdictions have done to be realigned or reinvented, and publics around this period of cutbacks and not on the trade-offs vice providers everywhere are feeling pressure of these courses of action. As a consequence, lead to make fundamental course changes to writers of jurisdictions in persistent distress will not size their operations. Find in the literature a comprehensive framework. Unfortunately, there is not a specific litera at which they may devise their own roadmaps to or on right-sizing governments. Instead, the For Managing Fiscal Right-Sizing literature suggests a number of different concepts. This essay examines some of the existing can be grouped under the right-sizing umbrella, literature that can broadly be related to right retrenchment, restructuring, reorganization, sizing. The essay then examines the extent to re-engineering, and reductions. Understanding the which this literature could be seen as different perspectives and methodologies contained within these approaches may help local government officials identify the type of changes one Department of Urban Studies and Planning, Wayne State that are needed and the skills needed to produce a University, Detroit, MI, USA to successful right-sizing of their government. City of Detroit General Services Department, Northwest. Unfortunately, these various approaches under Activities Center, Detroit, MI, USA. The right-sizing umbrella may not be of much corresponding author, help to local governments. Janet Anderson, City of Detroit General Services Depart. For example, one important body of literature meant, Northwest Activities Center, 18,100 Myers, OK. Broadly related to right-sizing, known as Cut Detroit Michigan 48235 USA. Back management, emerged as a result of the email, jan@detroitme.gov AQ15. 2. State and Local Government Review 000. Influencing Detroit, Michigan, and discusses shortcomings in the current research literature for guiding an actual effort to right-size a major city. The case of Detroit illustrates the needs and challenges associated with right-sizing local governments. The city is in the early stages of formulating a strategy for coping with its shrinking base and growing stewardship crisis, but its leaders have yet to conceptualize the full extent of the problem that needs to be addressed. Review of the cutback management and right-sizing literature. The cutback management literature was spawned by the fiscal stress being experienced by state and local governments in the 1970s and epitomized by the near-financial collapse of New York City in 1975. Some of the earliest documented efforts to employ cutback, retrenchment, strategies was in the 1970s and involved scaling back the reach of a number of municipal functions like hospitals and corrections. However, most public officials were probably unaware of the daunting task before them. Perhaps, sensing this naivete, Levine, 1978, 317, laid out the challenges that prevail when a growing base can no longer be assumed. Management and policy paradigms will have to be replaced or augmented by new frameworks to help to identify critical questions and strategies for action. Organizations cannot be cut back by merely reversing the sequence of activity and resource allocation by which their parts were originally assembled. Control and analytical tools are needed. p. 317. One of the earliest studies of cutback management was conducted by Lewis, 1984. He compared budgetary patterns of 6 fiscally healthy and 6 fiscally distressed municipalities between the years of 1964 and 1979 and concluded that rational, comprehensive and studied decision-making did not prevail. Simply put, there appeared to be little or no connection between resource scarcity and patterns of operating expenditures in either set of cities. While capital expenditures were deferred in times of crisis, budgetary strategies for operations were equally incremental or decremental in the healthy and the distressed scenarios. Based on what he learned from this comparison, Lewis offered the following measures that could be used to address fiscal stress: the well-known across-the-board cuts, deferral of maintenance, pay freezes, seniority retention, and the like. His work paints a picture in which jurisdictions are not proactively managing resource scarcity. With private sector responses to global competition starting in the 1980s, the concept of re-engineering, reorganizing, and reinventing gained prominence as a strategies for responding to fiscal constraints, e.g., see Aoki 1981, Osborne and Gabler 1992. Reengineering is focused on streamlining internal operating processes rather than on questioning the existence of functions or services themselves. Likewise, reorganization is about the roles assigned to accomplish existing organizational purposes or rethinking the pros and cons of centralized versus decentralized bureaucratic structures. Reinventing government revives ideas advocated by organizational humanists over 50 years ago and restates what we have known for many years. Osborne and Gabler, 1992, captured the modern drive for this kind of change by calling for the empowerment of communities/neighborhoods, citizens, and government workers. Closely allied to these concepts is the push from those in the new public management movement to consider the results that might be gained in service delivery efficiency and effectiveness through the use of public-private partnerships and outsourcing, performance measurement, and benchmarking, as well as listening to citizens through a variety of available mediums, public hearings, citizen survey, focus groups, etc. Both the reinventing government and new public management approaches to right-sizing stress managing for results. The Reason Foundation, which is committed to dynamic market-driven organizations, has advanced several strategies for right-sizing based on this principle, Eggers 1993. These include competition in the deployment of resources, activity-based costing of services. Anderson. 3. Entrepreneurial, performance-based budgeting where failure is not rewarded. Focusing on core businesses central to the mission of the jurisdiction. Reengineering of work processes. Reorganizing work structures such as job classifications and rigid hierarchies. As the mayor of Indianapolis in the 1990s, Stephen Goldsmith applied these principles in creating an outcome-based government, Eggers and Goldsmith 2003, 3. The Goldsmith administration is a high-profile case of the use of data and analysis to clarify service delivery options and facilitate competition among them. Strategic planning, organizational assessment, program design, evaluation, process improvement, reengineering, and performance measurement are all among the techniques increasingly used to create service monitoring systems in local governments, and not just for units in fiscal distress. Anderson 2006. Several other studies and academic works, Ben 1996, Clark and Ferguson 1983, Honadel, Sigler, and Costa 2004, Martin 1982, have resulted in a generic and mostly untested set of common practices of cutback management, e.g., efficient and flexible spending, long-term financial planning, avoidance of excessive commitments to fixed expenses such as debt service and unfunded post-employment liabilities, access to diverse, locally controllable revenue sources including property tax, adequate reserve levels to deal with abrupt temporary shocks, and the education of stakeholders about their jurisdiction's financial situation and the need for fiscal planning and prudence. Cutting back through increased efficiency, however, imposes new information requirements on local management and on the budgetary process with which local governments may not have the capacity to handle. Ben, 1996, identifies several basic tasks confronting the public manager in a cutback environment, i.e., deciding what to cut, maintaining morale, attracting and keeping quality people, rallying the support of key stakeholders, creating opportunities for innovation, and avoiding disasters, while others, C.E.G., Knollenberger, Groves, and Valenti 2003, highlight. OK. AQ4. Political obstacles to cutback management and right-sizing. With respect to some of the more recent approaches that have been taken place, Scorsone and Plurhiples, 2010, report that governments tended to rely on expenditure cuts over revenue increases during the recession of 2007-2010. The authors question if this practice represented a permanent change in the pattern of cutback management strategies previously documented, since cuts promised to be deep and strike the most vulnerable populations and yet tax increases were rarely implemented. In fact, Justice, 2009, 1, warns that politically palatable but unsustainable coping tactics will not suffice this time. He also argues that leaders must learn how to generate potential solutions and to choose the ones that improved long-term sustainability of the organization as well as bring stakeholders along through transparency of data analysis. Additionally, Rumler and Brach, 1990, point out that this task must be addressed in a comprehensive fashion. The resulting plan should not focus solely on position cuts or eliminating departments but should also involve rethinking the locus of responsibility and mechanisms for carrying them out. In short, jurisdictions need to shed costs without further degrading the product or they will spur further decline. This kind of comprehensive assessment is occurring in some local governments, e.g., see Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform 2007, Seals 1995. AQ 5. 1996. AQ 6. OK. A swirl of right-sizing initiatives in Detroit. The difficulties of the right-sizing challenge are evident in Detroit, and the Detroit case illustrates the need to better understand the methods and rationale for available courses of action to right-size. Detroit has suffered massive tax base erosion and 2 mayors initiated formal right-sizing efforts. This section reviews the formal right-sizing efforts that have taken place over the last several years in Detroit. Because different concepts of right-sizing are in play, the tools in use have not necessarily centered on the 4. State and Local Government Review 000. Specific challenges faced by the jurisdiction. Reviewing the array of initiatives brought forward in Detroit over this period exposes the value or lack of value of the existing literature related to right-sizing under Detroit Mayor Kilpatrick. The Strategic Management Center, SMC, was formed in 2005 to respond to a $250 million projected operating budget shortfall. This agency produced a lengthy report arguing for comprehensive change, including organizational consolidations, shared services, and increased outsourcing. Mayor Kilpatrick proposed organizational changes in every year of his tenure, many of them cost-saving consolidations that eliminated departments. Numerous process improvement initiatives such as just-in-time fleet maintenance parts were introduced, but additional organizations were added in this same era, such as the 311 call center, the Department of Administrative Hearings, the Office of Homeland Security, the Office of Targeted Business, and the SMC itself. The result was that the city had an accumulated deficit of over $250 million when the mayor left office in 2009. The Bing administration, which assumed office in May of 2009, began to grapple with how to best address the task of right-sizing the city bureaucracy because of the enormous deficit it inherited. Mayor Bing created the Office of Restructuring at the start of his tenure, CAFR 2009. The initiative, which used the methodology developed by the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments, SEMCOG, Local Government Effectiveness Program, SLGR 2010, engaged 100 city employees and researchers in analyses of organizational consolidation and business process streamlining around key city services. However, when Mayor Bing presented his first budget in April 2010 to City Council, members were critical of its lack of significant change and increased layers of executives in his administration, CAFR 2010A. Shortly after, the Office of Restructuring was dissolved and a national consulting company was hired by local foundations to assess existing processes used by the city's major departments, CAFR 2010B. The Transformation Management Office, TMO, was formed to provide project management of these process improvement initiatives. Business processes such as delinquent collections and space planning continue to be addressed, but TMO activities, by design, do not seek to redefine and prioritize responsibilities for public services, and restructuring the complex web of public service providers in Detroit is not a focus. In 2010, Mayor Bing formed the Detroit Works Project with the stated mandate of finding a more viable urban form for the increasingly vacant city, City of Detroit 2011. However, public meetings in fall 2010 did not address the issue of city service priorities, and focus group meetings early in 2011 featured per square mile cost figures that simply divided the current total budget by the city's 140 square miles. It is also clear that an overall vision for city land use is not yet in sight. The process created by the Detroit Works project may yield a new geography of the urban footprint that changes some service requirements, but it remains to be seen how this process will help fix Detroit's service delivery operations or consolidate the responsibilities across jurisdictions throughout the region. The essence of the right-sizing challenge: adjusting the mix of services. The continued distress of places like Detroit despite years of cuts should make clear that the right-sizing challenge really centers on the third part of the service delivery equation: meeting customer expectations. The mix and level of specific services delivered by the jurisdiction must be identified and analyzed in order to meet stakeholder expectations within available revenues. 3 tools central to managing service expectations are highlighted here as follows: creating an inventory of city services, monitoring and analysis of service delivery, planning across the web of service providers, inventory of services. Anderson. 5. An inventory of the services provided by the City of Detroit reveals hundreds of services in the categories of codes regulating buildings and grounds, emergency response, infrastructure maintenance, amenities, and supportive planning and tracking systems. Each category of services reveals a number of overlapping programs and processes. Monitoring and analyzing the cost and importance of services delivered. The SEMCOG Local Government Effectiveness Program assists the right-sizing efforts of local jurisdictions by identifying, prioritizing, and analyzing services against best practices. Under this program, city officials initially quantify the annualized cost and personnel levels required to provide each service. The goal is to develop a process of continuous improvement. As part of this process, the city compares service costs to a benchmark city to identify high-cost services. Finally, the city classifies each service as high importance or low importance. To be successful in this process, the local government must establish the information base necessary for deliberations needed to create a plan that addresses the specific issues revealed by the assessment. A service monitoring system makes it possible to overcome these challenging use of managing for results systems. Evaluative data and stakeholder reports are becoming the standard in governments for understanding the current operating environment, both in terms of the resources and activities currently offered and the demands for services from city residents. See www.gfooa.org for best practices. Where population decline is, delete an issue. The service requirements of blocks or and replace communities such as the average costs per width, GFOA 2011, street light, and street cleaning per block, need to be understood. Tools for gathering this information include an inventory of services and processes listing all activities and resources involved, organization charts that completely state staff relationships and responsibilities, process mapping in which sequences of tasks are outlined with resources used, benchmarking against prior service levels and other jurisdictions, forecasting of future revenues and expenses trends, including a set of assumptions about the forces in which your organization will operate, an environmental scan or assessment, compiling staff and equipment needs, and changing service demands for each service and provider and over several years. Costing out services is critical in elevating this information. In the City of Detroit, program appropriations are the basic unit of financial control, and they may not capture all of the direct costs associated with an activity nor include all indirect and overhead costs. Budgets for departments and agencies often do not reflect their responsibility for delivering multiple services. Civil service and contractual staffing may be dedicated, or workers may have multiple assignments, be seasonal, or have both line and staff functions. Second, tracking units of service at meaningful geographic levels is difficult because services may have different characteristics in different areas of town, and this presents a barrier to land use right-sizing itself. Planning across the web of local service providers. Planning a course of action starts with developing a consensus around a definition of the problem. This process helps garner needed leadership, support, and participation. A planning process has to address 2 important questions: what services and facilities add the least value to the city relative to cost? Is there duplication of effort among city departments and across jurisdictions? Many jurisdictions will not have the policy analysis and planning expertise in-house to analyze prospective course of action. Hiring a consultant can lend neutrality along with 6. State and local government review 000. Specialized expertise and enforce progress milestones. However, the cost of consultants may become an issue in times of fiscal crisis, and the right-sizing effort may not be sustainable if the necessary analytical skills are not institutionalized so that ongoing management information is collected and monitored. In a political environment, it is often a challenge to define the customers of right-sizing, and the kind of participation that makes sense for them. At this point, it does not appear that Detroit has yet to come to terms with how it, will factor in citizen priorities and facilitate a discussion of the division of labor across jurisdictions that overlap the city. McDonald 2011. A complex web of providers and funding sources administer public services, including lowercase, general-purpose governmental jurisdictions, city, county, regional and local special-purpose governmental authorities, school boards, library systems and land banks, quasi-public utilities, and private and non-profit organizations. Many services compete for the City of Detroit's general fund tax revenues for their primary support. Others are funded by user fees, pass-through revenues from the state government apportioned by formula, and other public resources. In a number of cases, it may be warranted to call into question the very existence of an organization as a public service provider that competes for these resources. The need for priority setting among field-based services, overhead, and non-neighborhood-based activities is especially needed. Where there is a surplus of developed land, cost analysis could help guide whether the city continues to use specific facilities and if some services should be redesigned, eliminated, re-engineered, or transitioned to non-governmental providers. Citizen input mechanisms are important to leverage the support of nonprofits, business, and citizens for these changes, as well as in carrying out related tasks. Once a consensus on the jurisdiction's responsibilities is achieved, administrative arrangements for fulfilling these responsibilities can be rethought. This step is particularly important for cities like Detroit, where some of the functions performed are unique, and where the city organization chart shows more departments and agencies, and of smaller size, than virtually every major city in the U.S. Setting up operating systems for a small number of insert SONL is inefficient and executing policy in a period, narrow context risks decision-making in a vacuum. The ratio of managers to direct reports has increased in recent decades, due to a combination of position upgrades and large cuts to the front-line positions since 2002. Other factors, specific features in the city charter and the city's strong mayor plan, also likely produce service inefficiencies. In addition, the overlap of responsibilities across, replace city departments with - suggests that labor-saving consolidation is possible, while the old bureaucratic hierarchy of incremental, top-down service delivery silos could be replaced by a leaner organization capable of responding to a dynamic environment. Right-sizing will call into question many of the most fundamental ways of doing business, so a combination of transparent, data-driven analysis and a strong voice clarifying the right-sizing goals will be essential at all times. Formalizing a right-sizing program is a difficult hurdle because one size does not fit all, so several important questions have to be answered early on. Who will make which decisions? Who will determine what decisions come forward for action, and when? And who will oversee implementation of the decisions that are made? But most importantly, with a global understanding of the ultimate problem that is at hand, a roadmap to lasting change can be established. Conclusion and next steps. The several different initiatives undertaken in Detroit reveal the different conceptions at work in this city's approach to the right-sizing challenge. These approaches have moved from comprehensive replanning of government services, to process improvement tactics for existing responsibilities, to seeking land use reforms. As such, these approaches reflect different paradigms, even if unstated, and prescribe different solutions. The first paradigm is predicated simply on reducing expenditures or increasing revenue. Under the second paradigm, the mix of services. Anderson. 7. and service levels are narrowed. The third paradigm essentially sees right-sizing in terms of changing the built environment to make better use of infrastructure and the delivery of services more efficient. All public and private organizations today have to reconfigure in a leaner, more effective form, and some are perishing as we knew them. Government must continue to improve its own internal mechanisms for managing change. A right-sizing plan will address a jurisdiction's problems if it addresses three basic issues. Should a service even be a jurisdiction's responsibility? How should activities under each responsibility be organized? Are there more efficient processes for carrying out responsibilities? The research literature reveals evolving thought about the management of decline, and it offers many tools for reducing cost structures, yet is an inadequate guide for laying out a course of action to respond to the particular needs of cities like Detroit. It is not yet clear if practices have moved very far from the days of across-the-board spending reductions and position elimination, where finance professionals make the decisions that define service levels and delivery methods. Right-sizing requires cutbacks but also raises questions about the utility of the existing concurrent and overlapping jurisdictions and the organization of programs within these jurisdictions. Where density has been decreasing, strategies have to focus on aligning the built environment serviced with the amount of land in use. These are questions that require the balancing of revenues and expenditures to customer expectations, and thus demand the exercise of all public management disciplines, not just the finance professionals. A number of depopulating cities are taking on the challenge of reimagining land use through urban greening initiatives or full-scale land use planning processes that hold the potential for right-sizing the road miles and acres of land that need the maintenance and regulatory activities that define modern life. At least 20 American cities are drafting formal plans to change the urban footprint, but until right-sizing becomes a component of greater regional responsibility, more planning, cooperation, and revenue sharing between cities and suburbs, it's difficult to understand how it and related heroic efforts by U.S. mayors will revitalize shrinking cities. Favreau 2010, 2. Thus, a broad-based definition of the problem must precede and guide the unveiling of policy initiatives that purport to right-size a government jurisdiction or regional partners will fail to engage. Even if the city of Detroit is able to reduce the number of square miles to which it must provide services, it will still need to rationalize the palette of services it provides and to make them more efficient, or it will continue to lag behind its regional neighbors and continue its sharp decline. In March 2011, the state of Michigan passed the Local Government and School District Fiscal Accountability Act to provide more latitude in the appointment of and tools given managers for financially distressed communities. The hope will be that the individuals entrusted with these responsibilities carry out their mandate within a coherent framework for right-sizing, one of data gathering, collective priority setting, and collaboration to make sustainable change. Declaration of conflicting interests. The author declared no potential conflicts of interest with respect to the research, authorship, and/or publication of this article. Funding. The author received no financial support for the research, authorship, and/or publication of this article. OK. AQ7. References. Anderson, Janet. 2006 Note to Budget Professionals, Policy Analysts Support Policy and Operational Decision Making. Government Finance Review 22, 2633. Anderson, Janet. 2010 The Surplus of City Services. Presentation to the City of Detroit Charter Revision Commission, Charter Convention No. 2, delete November 21. AQ8. 8. State and Local Government Review 000. Ben, Robert. D. 1996. Cutback Management, 6 Kaffer, Nancy. 2010 A Bing Plan Called Sketchy. Volume 26, Issue Basic Tasks. Governing 9, 68. April 20. Crane's Detroit Business. Boger, Dave. 2010 Restructuring Local Govern Kaffer, Nancy. 2010 B. McKinsey Consultants P7. 16. Take Ment, City of Wyandotte, Michigan. February over Detroit's restructuring effort. July 13. One presentation available at www.semcog.org. Cranes Detroit Business. Volume 26, SLGR429713, Levine, Charles H. 1978. Organizational 19. 28, P. Decline and City of Detroit. 2011. Why change? www.Detroit Cutback Management. Public Administration Worksproject.com. Review 38, 31625. Clark, Terry N., and Lorna C. Ferguson. 1983. City Lewis, Gregory B. 1984. Municipal Expenditures, Money, Political Processes, Fiscal Strain, and Through Thick and Thin. Publius, The Journal of Retrenchment. New York, New York, Columbia University or Federalism 14, 319. City Press. Martin, J.K. 1982. Urban Financial Stress, Why Site Getters, William D. 1993. Right-Sizing Government, IES Go Broke. Boston, Ma, Auburn. Lessons from America's Public Sector Innovators. McDonald, Christine. 2011. Secrecy an Issue in Plan Reason Foundation. How to Guide Number 11, to Reshape Detroit. Detroit Free Press, January 21. AQ January 13. Knollenberger, K., S. M. Groves, and M. G. Valenti. Detroit, Eggers, William D., and Stephen Goldsmith. 2003-2003. Evaluating Financial Condition, A Handbook for Local Government, 4th ed. Washington, D.C., insert. This Works, Managing City Finances. The MANP//www.Manhattan Institute. Number 31, March. International City/County Management AQ9civicinstitute.org/html/cb_31.htm Association. Favreau, Tony. 2010. American cities seek to discover bulletin their right size. www.citimoears.com/develop Osborne, David, and Ted Gabler. 1992. Reinventing Government, How the Entrepreneurial Spirit is Meant /us Rightsizing Cities.html, accessed April 5. Transforming the Public Sector. Reading Ma, GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. Addison Wesley. 2011. Recommended Best Practices. www.gfoa.org. AQ10. Auke, William. 1981. Theory Z, How American Honadel, Beth W., Beverly A. Sigler, and J. M., OK to Keep, 2004. Fiscal Health for Local Governed Business Can Meet the Japanese Challenge. New Costa. See File P.6, An Introduction to Concepts, Practical York, New York, Avon Books. Mentz, Rumler, Geary A., and Alan P. Bratch. 1990. Analysis and Strategies. Boston, Ma, Elsevier. Improving Performance, How to Manage the Academic Press. 1996. White Space on the Organization Chart. San Fran, Indiana Commission on Local Government Reform. Cisco, CA, JAWS Base Management Series. 2007. Streamlining Local Government, We've Got Scorsone, Eric, and Christina Plurhupels. 2010. Fisto Stop Governing Like This. Report of the Indiana Cal Stress and Cutback Management, What Have Commission on Local Government Reform. For We Learned, and What Remains to Be Learned. State Zion 1.0. Center for Urban Policy and the Envy and Local Government Review 42, 17687. Ronmont, Indiana University, December 11. Ed. G. J. Miller and J. H. Seals, Gerald. 1995. Taming City Hall, Right-Sizing Justice, Jonathan. 2009. Prepared for the Coping with Fiscal Stress. Svara. Infor Results. San Francisco, CA, Institute for Navigating the Fiscal Crisis, Tested Strategies for Contemporary Studies. Local Leaders. Alliance for Innovation, Interna Phoenix, AZ, Alliance for Innovation. Available at http://icma.org/en/icm Additional City /County Management Association. AQ11 Kaffer, Nancy. 2009 Bing team works to define knowledge_network/documents/kn/bio what services fit government's role. November document /300882/10. Cranes Detroit Business. AQ12 AQ2. Coping _with fiscal_stress http://www.cranesdetroit.com/article/20091110 email 01/3111099995 Bing team works to define what services fit government's role. Number AQ2 Bio. Janet Anderson is the General Manager of the City of Detroit General Services Department. She headed Detroit's Office of Restructuring as Deputy Budget Director from 2009 to 2010, and has been an adjunct professor in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at Wayne State University since earning a doctorate in public policy from the University of Maryland, Baltimore in 1996.